My name is Dean Takahashi. I'm the lead writer for GamesBeat at a tech news site called VentureBeat. I have been covering the game industry for about 19 years, and I've been a tech writer for 25 years, or 26 years now. I also run these GamesBeat conferences that happen twice a year now. We have one in May, and we have our larger GamesBeat 2015 conference that is going to be October 12th and 13th this year in San Francisco. And I'm excited to moderate this panel because we have a very interesting group of veterans of game development and game publishing here that are from very different parts of the industry. And here to my right is Glen Schofield. You heard from him earlier today. He's the general manager and co-founder of Sledgehammer Games. His studio created Call of Duty, Advanced Warfare, and Glen has a long history of working on some games like Dead Space for EA's Visceral Games studio. So welcome. We have Noah Falstein. He's the chief game designer at Google. And I'm not sure if Google makes games, but I guess they do.
one or two there.
The Google Doodle games maybe may count?
There's that Ingress thing, a few
Oh
others out there.
yeah, Ingress is pretty good. Huh? Yeah. And Noah has also been around the industry for quite a long time, working at places like LucasArts, DreamWorks, and 3DO. And we have Berlin's own Jens Begemann, chief executive of Wooga, the creator of games such as Agent Alice, Pearl's Peril, and Jelly Splash, and Ed Fries, who is the former head of Microsoft Game Studios. He's I guess, game advisor now. Is that the career you have now?
Advisor, board member, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But Ed had 18. 1 million unit hits at Microsoft during his time at the head of Microsoft Game Studios.
That used to be a big number, right?
Yeah. And he was also one of the founding members of the Xbox team as well. So welcome everybody. And I guess from where you each sit, tell us a bit more about how long you've been in games and why you're still in it.
I've been doing 25 years, and why am I in it? I think because every single game presents a challenge. I feel like video games are one of the biggest creative endeavors that we have in entertainment, because it's it's not just visuals, but it's gameplay, and it's yes, we just keep adding more and more to them, and I just really love the challenge. I love working with people, and I'd love to see people's faces when they like the game that you made.
Well, it's 35 years for me, and I was actually talking to Ed yesterday about how one of my influences was in the 1970s seeing Nolan Bushnell's Computer Space, which is what he did before he did Pong. That wasn't a big commercial success, but did get me, and I'm sure quite a few others, excited about creating the future. And when I look back to that era, we had the movie 2001, and when 2001 finally rolled around, it was really disappointing we couldn't go for a vacation, in the Orbital Hilton. But on the other hand, our video games were a whole lot better than playing 2D chess, with HAL. So. I really feel happy that we are in an industry where we've been able to kind of create this science fictional future around us, and it just keeps getting better and better. So as long as they keep finding work for me to do, I'm in.
Yeah, so professionally, I can't look back to that many years of experience. However, when I count back, kind of when I hacked my first game together in BASIC on an Apple II, that was in '87, so when I was 10. And I've always been very, very interested in games my whole life, but kind of really in terms of starting Wooga, that was 6 years ago. And what drove me back then and still drives me is that games are there since decades and millions of people play it, but still only a fraction of the population is really, really playing games every day. And that is what we with Wooga tried to change, or be part of this change, where games become an entertainment form where everybody plays every single day. And we started on Facebook, and we've since moved to mobile, and it really excites me that lots and lots of people who years ago told me, oh, games, oh, stay away with these first-person shooters from me. That's not for me. That's for the gamers who are now playing every day on their phone. And that really excites me, how we're really making games something that's normal. Like music, listening to music, watching TV, it's a normal thing, and that really excites me.
I like that. It's normal. That's we're finally to normal.
It's not
That's,
nerdy anymore.
That's so
right?
great.
Yeah, it's not-
No, it's a huge statement. Actually, I like that. I published my first game in 1982. That was the same year I graduated from high school. For me, games and programming were really combined together. I fell in love with programming, but what are you going to program? Why not a game? That sounds like fun. So to me, they were always mixed together and still are. By the way, if you don't know what computer space is, I just spent 3 months fixing one, and I wrote a long blog about it. So you go to edfreeze.wordpress.com, you can learn all about computer space, the first arcade video game ever made.
You're in the 8-bit world still, right, Ed?
I'm in all the worlds, yeah.
Okay. I guess, Ed, maybe you sort of ended a long career at Microsoft back in, what, 2004 now? Or?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And you know, the game industry has changed so much. I wonder if you sort of give some perspective about, you know, what it felt like as you were exiting Microsoft at that time, and what you see now, I guess.
I'm hugely optimistic about where the game industry is. We've been through an incredible amount of change since 2004. I mean, back then, you know, pretty much the only way you could reach a lot of people was to be working on a console game, and not very many people could get that opportunity. The teams were getting bigger, but there were getting to be less and less of them. So it looked a little bleak. Some people thought the PC gaming was going away. You know, that's another thing. Since then, we had web-based games, social gaming, free-to-play gaming, digital distribution, mobile gaming, just one revolution after another. And what's happened is it's created one market after another. And so instead of it just being one thing that's going to be the future of games, now we can see there's all these different platforms and all these choices, and they all create opportunities for game developers.
So everybody here is kind of at a very seasoned part of a career. I wouldn't say, I guess, maybe the peak or what, but what kind of advice then do you have for people who are starting out now? You know, I guess you wouldn't tell them to go into Facebook social games right now, but what would you say that you should pay attention to, or you should study, or you should be ready for, I guess?
Sometimes it's good to go where people aren't going. That could be an opportunity.
You never know.
You can all take a crack at this.
Well, you know, one thing that has been absolutely true throughout the whole history of games has been that if you have an aptitude for coding, that's a really good way to get a good, steady, safe, employment. Now, perhaps even more than before. So that, unfortunately, I find it tends to be sort of a predestined thing. You know, it seems like there aren't a lot of people who say, "Oh, never even considered doing that. Let me try it," and find that they're actually good at coding. You know, it's almost a calling that way. But short of that, one of the things that has been clear to me that I try and pass on to people is passion is great. Passion is actually really important because there's so many passionate people who just love what they're doing in this industry. It's hard to compete, if you don't have that. But being persistent and sticking with whatever it is that you do and not giving up is, in my experience, that quality that turns, particularly people breaking into the industry, that's the difference between somebody who tries for a month or two or sends out 3 or 4 resumes and gets disappointed versus the one that sends out 80, and that 80th actually is a huge, gets them into their dream job. Persistence probably trumps just about everything else.
I got to jump in here. You said 2 or 3 things that I always say: passion, persistence, and patience. All the time when I talk at school, so that's pretty amazing. That the same.
My biggest thing really to young people would be make games. The tools are now so powerful that even if you are not an engineer by education, you can create games that are fun. So you can use Unity, you can use things like Game Maker, for example. So one of our game designers last autumn was starting to work on a strategy game, and he said, well, let me try alone. I will do the very first prototype in Game Maker. And I told him, okay, fine, when you need engineers, let me know. And it was basically just two people, like a game design background. And after 3 months, they had a strategy game with PvP in it, coded in Game Maker. That was just prototype, no graphics inside, but where 50 employees played over months, over Christmas, with things like 20, 30, 40 sessions a day and competing for the high score. And that looked like obviously nothing that you could ship, but it was fun. It was clearly fun. And you don't need to be an engineer. If you're alone as kind of a game designer, you can create with these powerful tools. You can create games that are fun and that your friends will enjoy.
The other thing is, people are always saying, "Oh, I can't get a job. There's not many jobs. You have a dream job." And what I talk about is like, okay, let's just take for a second. At my studio in Foster City, we have 250 people. EA is about a mile away, and they have a couple thousand, right? We got LucasArts, and we have on and on, Toys for Bob. In our area alone, we probably have 10,000 jobs. Yeah. My studio alone has 120 jobs for artists. You go down to LA, and you're talking thousands of jobs. So don't say you can't. There's no work. There is. It's a persistence and passion and all that will get you in there. There are jobs. But you got to love what you do, and you got to show us that you love it. And we want to give jobs out. We want to give jobs out to passionate people who are really good and talented. So they are there.
What is some of the progression of a career now, though? Like, I mean, do you start out, say, like Ed recently did a Atari 2600 version of Halo, right? And I think that
I don't think that's the standard progression.
Well, that gives you the skill, though, probably to do a wearable game, right? An Apple Watch game, maybe. So that's like one interesting end of the spectrum of games, and then you could also be one of 250 people working on a Call of Duty game. It's a very different experience than doing a game all by yourself.
But to me, it's, back to what you said, I mean, about making games, there's just no excuse anymore. I mean, if you're a designer, you can make a game by yourself. I mean, if you're a programmer, write a lot of code. If you're an artist, you were talking as a kid, how much you drew as a kid all the time, And
show that, yeah.
Make stuff, that's how you get better.
I don't know, I think, because I'll hear different things as well. It's like, oh, well, I don't want to do a mobile game, or I don't want to do a console game with 250 people. And I don't know, I think that's the wrong attitude. The attitude should be, I'm going to get in the game industry. Because once you get in, we want to keep you in because you have experience. And if you're good, and you know what, whether you're making a mobile or a console game, you're making a game, man. You're making a game for a living. There's just something great about that.
I run into that all the time, actually. It's like people always saying, I can't decide if I should apply to this company or that.
Yeah,
I'm like, apply to all of them.
Yes.
Then
Get
when
in.
you get the offers, then you decide.
Yeah.
Then you can be
Yeah.
picky, right?
Yep.
And if you only get one, that's where you're going.
That's
You're
right.
in the game
Exactly.
business.
Yeah.
So Noah, why would Google be an interesting place to wind up if you're a game person, right?
Well, Google certainly has not been the first company people think of, as a game company. On the other hand, we support games pretty much across the spectrum, and I think probably more so than any other single company. We've got obviously Android and all of the mobile platforms. Just in the last year, we've also announced Android TV, Project Tango, Project Cardboard. Lots of exciting ways that people can make games of all types, from consoles and mobile, to virtual reality. I'm certainly, I in fact do get a lot of people asking, hey, you're at Google, are you making games? What can I do to help? Google is a big enough company that even a small percentage of it making games means that there's actually a fair number of game jobs, and I point people at our website for that because I never even hear about the majority of them. The company is so big. But the reality is I think we're moving into a future where games are increasingly varied. As Ed says, I had a conversation at GDC right around that time you left with Rich Hilleman, and he depressed the hell out of me because he was just talking about AAA, and the other piece, of course, was that the kinds of games that those handful of AAA companies were making were almost all the same sequels, or the same 5 genres with the big question is, shall we do a science fiction or a fantasy variant this time? So I think we're in a really bright time that way, and having the kind of breadth of what we do is a big part of what Google is behind, and making it possible to have even wider range of games and get them into the hands of the next billion people who will be coming online in the next few years. I'm really excited to find out what happens to adults who get their first smartphone next year, and I'm sure they probably won't spend their money on just a game, but if that's not the second thing that they download, I'll be very surprised.
So Glenn, you're starting to hear some indirect, say, criticisms of the AAA business, like kind of sort of the death of consoles, the shrinking of AAA, the sort of fewer jobs that are left available, and then the sort of choice that's left of do you want to just make sequels for the rest of your life or whatever. How do you sort of kind of defend your part of the industry as something that's still worth being part of, I guess?
Well, how do I defend it? I look at what we're making is a blockbuster movie. And I think I'm very optimistic about the whole approach to everything, because I think the mobile games are introducing new people to video games. They're opening up new areas. They're going in. We're in China. They're in every country, and eventually, I'm hoping that there's going to be people who say, well, that was a lot of fun. I want to move over to some of the console games and see what that's like. It's hard for me. I'm sitting on top of the biggest game, so it's hard to say that it's going down, right? Because we maybe the sales are a little bit down, but that's just because of the console transition. We still sold so many.
$1 billion is more than enough, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to I was watching the Academy Awards the other day, and they're like, "Hey, the top 7 movies made $700 million this year," and I'm like, "We did that in a week." So I don't know. I just love what's happening. I love what's happening. And the one thing about there's not less jobs. There are probably more jobs in console than there were before, because the games are so big. We had 250 people at our studio. By the time we're done, we have 1,000 people, right, that we're working on a game like that. And it's just, it's still a lot of fun. Everybody gets their own, there's so much creativity. And Advanced Warfare, to me, was a new IP. It just said Call of Duty on it, because we had to design the whole thing from scratch. It was 50 years in the future, so we had a ton of fun. It was very, very creative.
And Jens, I guess on your side, the outer limit of what you can achieve has changed pretty dramatically over the past few years, right? I mean, you can now reach 1 billion people, and games like Clash of Clans are making over $1 billion a year, right? And they're not moving from these top-grossing charts. So the opportunity, if you knock somebody out of that top grossing chart, is pretty huge. How do you sort of feel about this sort of growth of mobile and why it's the place to be, I guess?
Yeah, mobile is just incredible. I mean, we have been optimistic about it for years, but the reality is even bigger than I would have guessed. I think what mobile does, it brings games to so many more people, because now everybody has a games device. I think that's the big difference, where for a console you have to make a conscious decision to buy one. Everybody just has it with them all the time. You buy it maybe for Facebook or for your messages or whatever, but then it's also a games device. Therefore, everybody has one. You suddenly, because the games are free to download, you reach really everybody. So that's really an amazing opportunity. And then, because you can design sessions that are 90 seconds or 2 minutes, people always find some time. There's a ad break on TV, or you're waiting for the bus. So there's always an opportunity to play, and that's why the market is so gigantic. At the same time, that is not a secret. That is not really a secret, and therefore, because also the barriers of entry are so low, everybody is going in, and the competition is just crazy. I don't know the exact number, but the vast majority of games made for mobile don't earn back their development costs. So even if maybe a console game may be 50 million or more, even if a mobile game, let's say, is $1 million, and some of them may be less or more, the vast majority doesn't earn back their development costs because it's very concentrated at the top. If you're, there are 100,000 games on the App Store. If you're not in the top 100, probably you don't matter. So you have to be in the top tens of the top 1%. And that's the situation, and that's how we've designed our company culture and everything we do about how can we experiment, how can we be creative, how can we create games. And if we have a game during development where we say, hey, that's pretty good, then we stop it. That's not enough. It has to be great. So I think if you go into mobile games, you have to be aware, either you do it for kind of yourself to experiment a little bit, but if you want to make a business out of it, you have to be very, very rigorous, and only the very, very, very best things should go through. And it's not by highest production value. It's really about being unique in what you do and yeah, allowing people to play for a year every day.
So you folks have all sort of been through a lot of cycles and platform changes. And I'm kind of wondering how you apply some of that, say, wisdom to what is probably, you know, the most chaotic environment ever in games for those kinds of changes. You know, like we were supposed to be in a console cycle, you know, with Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, but Nintendo is sort of ending the life of their console early, and then we're getting all these weird things like, you know, the NVIDIA Shield arriving, and maybe Alibaba is working with Ouya on some kind of console for the Chinese market or whatever. So, you know, Android micro consoles, cloud gaming, et cetera. How do you sort of apply some of the learnings of having been through platform and cycle changes to what is happening today?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some things that you see that happen over and over again. You know, there's a platform comes out, the early adopters do really well, and then things start to get harder. A lot of people rush into the market, budgets start to go up, you start to get consolidation, starts to get harder. When it gets harder, people react in certain ways. Sometimes they start to, there's more sequels, there's more copying, there's more brands. You start to see that now in mobile. People are saying, well, you know, I love your attitude. Let's be more creative, right? I think that's the right approach. But an easier approach is to say, oh, no, I'm just going to go get this strong brand. I'm going to do the Kim Kardashian game or whatever. And so those things you see that are the same, but at the same time, you can't rely too much on that history because free-to-play is different, digital distribution is different. So I think trying to find the line between those two things.
But can I ask you guys a question, if you don't mind? Is a lot of the games that I see, you know, we like family plays so many of the games, so of course we will play a lot of those games, and I look at them like, wow, I made that game like 14 years ago, right? on the NES or the SNES, right? And then, you know, playing some of the games and Plants vs. Zombies or something like that, and at first it's all 2D painted sprites. Yeah. Then they're 3D rendered sprites. So is what happened in the console business going to eventually happen in the mobile business? Is at some point the consumer going to say, yeah, I played the 2D side scroller for a while, or whatever, the top down, or I want the big immersive world now, or does it just not happen?
I think there are a number of differences, actually. So obviously, in terms of technical capabilities, that is definitely happening. And if real-time 3D is an advantage to my game and makes it better, then it will now happen because now the devices are capable, and a few years ago they were not. I think the key difference you have is that I think free-to-play, one big difference of free-to-play is that if you do a $70 game, people mostly buy it before they have played it. So they pre-order it, they buy it based on reviews or on video, on screenshot, or all of those things are really, really key. And because of that, also production value is incredibly important, because if it's a high production value, it's easier for me to give $70. In a free-to-play game, it has to be good looking, but because it's free-to-play, people are more willing to just try it out and to download it. And then you have to keep them. The key to success there is retention, to keep them in the game for a year or longer. So better graphics are a factor, but it's always more about how you keep them in the game. It's less about how you appeal to them beforehand. And then I think one thing that is really, really different, that almost all successful mobile games allow for this 90-second or 2-minute session. And that is really a key difference, where I'm a console gamer myself, but it's really about I sit down, I lower the shades, it's half an hour or 2 hours of focus time, where for a mobile game, it's okay, I'm waiting for the bus, I know I've got at least 2 minutes, maybe longer, let me put it out and play it. But if I know I have to at least invest now 20 minutes, then I wouldn't even start it. That's, I think, a key difference in my mind.
Maybe for Noah, you know, we may see console history play out again on mobile. But what happens if something like AR and VR enter the picture and hijack that? Right?
Yeah, well, I'm listening to this, and I'm cognizant of, we're having discussions here that, are talking about where studios or decisions to make really large games, where they should go, and it is a pretty scary time. It's always been a bit scary. I think less so now, perhaps, because it's nice that so many of these different things are successful. The AAA, the comment I was making about 10 years ago, I actually think things have improved on all fronts, including AAA, and that there is more variety in there. There's a little bit more room to maneuver than there was for a while. And in a similar way, I think, I look at an audience of game developers, and there's a mix, I'm sure, of, I know for a fact, having talked to people, that there are, little 1- and 2-person teams, or people wanting to break in. There are people with small companies, or even medium-sized ones and large ones. The people from the large companies want to bring back pearls of wisdom, that sort of thing. It's hard to have one piece of advice or one trend for everyone to lock onto. And of course, if I said it's all about virtual reality and everybody in the room started to do that, well, as Ed says, the one who doesn't listen to that and does something else when the whole room is going in one direction, they're the ones that are going to do well. So it's a tough thing, but a friend of mine, Steve Begemann, who's got a long history in the games industry, and he's teaching at DigiPen now, he used to say, if it were easy, anyone could do it. And I think the trick with this, and to speak to VR in particular, is not just to rush into the new thing, but to be smart, be careful, find the ways that, if you're an individual, small company, large company, each of those has certain strengths and weaknesses. As an individual, you may feel that the deck's stacked against you and the big companies have all the advantages, but you're the one who can go there, spend a couple of weeks, a couple of months working on some little gem that is the first one on a brand new system, and be the next Mojang, or have the next Flappy Bird out there. It's amazing that this industry has room for people down at that level, and of course room for companies making $1 billion a year. And I'm really excited. You realize we're almost certainly within a few years, maybe within 1 year of the time that there's a game that's going to have 1 billion monthly active users out there. I mean, it's an amazing time that we're reaching that. And so I think you need to make games that play off of your strengths and find the right niche or the right place in a new area that just works for you.
Yeah, I think it's funny that there's so much talk about the VR and AR coming up and taking over, and I haven't played one game. I'm still, of course I've seen a lot, and we had it running on our stuff. We try it out a lot. I just think that we've been hearing about the death of consoles. We've been hearing the death of different things for a while, but yet the market is just growing.
Yeah.
So I think AR and VR, they will have their place within the group of video games eventually, and maybe at that point we're 100 billion a year, and we can all work. Right. And there's just great. I look at the mobile stuff right now and think, man, there's like 1 billion cell phones out there that still don't play games yet, and that's a lot of growth.
Yeah.
So Glenn, I think everybody's sleeping in the audience now. Maybe you want to throw some T-shirts out?
Oh, are we sleeping? Hey, yeah, I forgot to give them away before that. So wake up, wake up, wake up.
He's going to throw it wherever he hears the loudest cheering.
Sure. All right. Who wants them?
We're gonna save a couple because if we have time for questions.
We might need it later, yeah.
This is where the fact that I've never worked on sports games is a distinct disadvantage.
Speaking of sports, how about esports?
That's right.
Is that exciting to you guys?
I think it's incredible to see what's happened. I mean,
amazing.
I just had to help like some friends of friends get tickets to the international, the Dota 2 tournament in Seattle, and I mean I tell stories about that event in Seattle last year. It takes place in the Key Arena, which is where our basketball team used to play, our professional basketball team, and sold out immediately again this year. Even if you were there clicking right when they launched, you wouldn't get tickets. Last year, they raised a prize pool over $12 million, I think, and that was all raised from within crowdfunding within the game. And the winning team took home $5 million, which was more than the PGA, Professional Golf Association, major tournament that happened that same weekend. And I think there were, I don't know the exact numbers, but there are likely quite a few more people watching the international tournament than watched the PGA major, which is another thing you tell non-game people and they don't believe you, but then you show all the color commentators and all the different broadcasts in different languages over Twitch and how many people are on all the streams, plus Valve's own direct streaming. It's incredible. I mean, it's something we've talked about for years. It's finally really happening.
Yeah, it's funny because when we make our game, right, and we'll judge it by looking at it once in a while, because somebody's playing it and we're judging, and they're like, you can't judge a game by looking at it. But nowadays with Twitch and everything, people are just watching games, right? Yeah, we just had a Call of Duty one where we gave $1 million away. We're talking to, we work with them a little bit more now. We want them to give us feedback and play the game, and I think it's pretty amazing.
In terms of, there are a lot of game people at Google who are actually over on YouTube just because there's so much going on there. And, it's one thing to be a professional, high-speed game player. It's amazing to me that you can actually do so well just being a game player who then goes out and comments and, becomes incredibly successful. And that shows every sign of continuing to grow. It's, people are concerned, I know, about discovery, and that's one of those happy things where both the people that become these commentators and very popular YouTube channels, it's good for them, it's good for players, and it's a whole new entertainment form.
The opening keynote today, the Amazon guy showed the top YouTubers, and I don't know, it was like 3 of the top 5 or 4 of the top 6 were all game related, and they were all above any star that you might know. So any music star, that kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of making game journalists and game reviewers feel a bit obsolete now.
You just got to get on YouTube.
Open a channel, Dean. We want to see you.
Anyone can do it.
You got to change like we
Open my
have to.
Twitch channel up pretty soon. Do we have any questions from the audience? I've asked a lot of my list of questions already, so. And I guess we have microphone runners
there you
too.
go. Or
Got
yell.
them. They weren't quite ready. They're grabbing the mic.
Oh, surprise them.
We can
We
give
might have
away
all
one
the
of ours.
Well, we're supposed to answer this question about QUO VADIS game industry, like where's the game industry going? So does anybody actually have a great prediction on, say, what you're going to be doing in the Star Trek holodeck, or what you're going to be doing in a game in the distant future, I guess?
Yeah, sorry. My question regards kids.
Can you hold that question for?
Oh, sorry.
They take that question. Anyway,
We'll get to you, Jim. I think, I'm always reluctant. A lot of times there's this question of where's the games industry going, and people want the one thing, and I've already addressed that. You know, there's many things, and I'm grateful for that. I do believe that the sort of holodeck feel, you know, having tried a lot of these new VR systems recently, I was a skeptic. Jaron Lanier did a demo for a group of us at Lucasfilm Games in 1984, and that he was the guy that coined the term virtual reality. And the fact that it's taken so long has made a lot of people really skeptical that, you know, yeah, we've heard this before, everybody's been on the verge of it. And in the talk I give tomorrow, I show a cartoon somebody drew, a game developer did in 1983 about the future of arcades, and it looks very much like, you know, Oculus Rift, frankly. So it's taken a very long time. But I do think that we are at that point. I was talking about at the beginning about creating science fiction of the future, and even before Star Trek and holodecks, I would read books that had this idea of people being able to go into these sort of virtual reality systems. There was a great one from, I think, the early 60s called Waystation that had it as a minor plot point. And it's very exciting to me that we're getting to that point now of just being able to blend the real world and the virtual world increasingly seamlessly, much as the movie visual effects people have been able to do. It will be able to do that in real time, you know, in everybody's privacy of everybody's home.
So now you know, you just told everybody to go into virtual reality, and that's exactly what you said you weren't going to do, right? Yeah.
We just,
Well,
I just finished watching
warned
a Japanese anime series with my kids called Sword Art Online, and it's there's about 50 episodes. It takes place all in a VR world. But actually, what that got me thinking about more about the future is this idea of value and what matters. You know, I see. I'll try to explain this. Like my kids would much rather get a stored value card for their birthday than a toy. You know, because to them it's just as real. You know, when they can take that and go into a game and buy some digital asset, to them it's just as real. And so I actually think that that's something that you're really going to see blur over the next decade, is this idea of what we think is real. I mean, like, and what I would ask you to think about is, what are the things, why do you think that the real world is so real? I mean, the things we care about in the real world, diamonds, you know, the only reason we value diamonds is because De Beers wants us to. There's actually plenty of diamonds in the world, but they limit the supply. Or pearls. Pearls are just coated plastic spheres that are stuck in oysters. Or money. What is money? You know, when you have Bitcoin, you know, it makes us wonder what money really is. All the other things we care about are mostly brands, mostly things that someone told us are important, or told us are worth something. They're just as virtual as these virtual items. So I think that blurring of what is real and why real things matter more than virtual things is something that's really going to change. Maybe our generation has to die, but for the next generation, I think they see it differently. Okay, now we're going to do your question.
Okay, thank you. My question is about the paying audience of mobile games. My kids are now 12 and 14, and they do not make in-app purchases. But there's a big generation coming up now towards 18 or whatever the age limit may be in any given country, to make these purchases themselves, and they grow up with a game that is, where the free-to-play is a natural way to purchase things. Do you see that as another factor that will drive mobile even, push it even harder, even higher?
So maybe I go answer this question. So the vast majority of people of any age don't ever purchase anything in a mobile game. So I would say industry average is around 95% of people don't spend money, 5% do. And that share seems to be increasing because I think there are more and more examples of games where you actually get fair value for your purchase. There are a lot of bad examples where you spend $5 and you get nothing back, but I think there are more and more people who have made purchase experiences in mobile games and said, well, actually, the beer is $5, I just spent $5 here, that was actually worth it, and therefore repeat a purchase in the same game or in other games. So I think it's a little bit connected to age, because obviously the people who spend in mobile games are adults who have disposable income. Many of them 20, 25, 30, 40, 50, 60, We have 70 and 80-year-olds spending in our games, women mostly. But I think the biggest factor is if people get good value, they will continue to spend in the future.
Another question from the audience?
Yeah, hi. I wanted to mention the topic augmented reality, virtual reality, because I'm also working in the augmented reality business, and it's a fascinating branch or fascinating industry right now. And I'm wondering about, you know, we are sticking to this genres all the decades. We know action games, we know those platformers, we know the strategy games. But for those new platforms, which have a really new rule set at all, do we need new genres, or do you just see genres evolving, or do you really see the potential for really a broad possibility potential for new genres coming up to really get the ideas of those interfaces?
Well, I'll actually be talking a little bit about that tomorrow. I think one of the things we see clearly from experience is that the first games on a new platform, particularly when there are new capabilities, tend to be the old games, you know, shoehorned into this new platform, and it's not until the next generation of games or someone does a daring experiment that suddenly goes crazy that everyone says, there's a whole new way of using this whole platform. And I think that, in fact, augmented reality specifically is one of those areas that's going to be very likely that way. I'd go out on a limb and say the hit game that will put augmented reality on the map will be of a type that hasn't been seen yet. It won't just be a better first-person shooter that you get to do, you know, in your own home or something. And that's part of what excites me about the games industry in general. We keep creating these new technologies and new possibilities. And this is just one of several of those areas that I think is going to open up a lot of new stuff. I'll give you a preview that one of the types of games that I think will be possible, and this is something that I'm thinking about with our Project Tango device, it's not just that you can look through it and see the real world and have virtual objects in it, but it knows where it is in the real world. So you could have stealth games where it's not about controlling a character, it's about you moving through your own world stealthily, that if you turn too quickly or you move too quickly, there can be a reaction from the guards or, you know, set off an alarm. And I don't know that that would be a huge hit, but it's never really been possible before. And that idea that somebody who may not have fast reflexes may actually be able to succeed by being very slow, I think that's really intriguing. You know, there's a lot of, you know, maybe this is as I'm aging, I think this is what everybody wants. But who knows where it will go, and that's partly what I love about it. We just can't really tell what the next big hit will be that way.
Thank you.
I thought of a question for Glenn too as well. So a lot of the mobile game companies are about to go grab a brand, I guess, and try to succeed with it. And I wonder what thought you might have about, you know, getting the right brand, but also innovating with it.
With a brand?
Mm-hmm. You've got the biggest brand there is, Call of Duty,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so,
Well,
how do you innovate still, even though you've got something that's so familiar to everybody?
Yeah, well, that's sort of the ultimate question is what every year, what are we going to do that's different? And I found the biggest changes, you know, the biggest innovations in games are when we do have a big sea change. When we went from 2D to 3D, we actually went from 2D to 2.5D to 3D. When we went from, you know, 8-bit to 16-bit, when things change dramatically, like the company, you know, Activision is saying to me now, well, you got to change the way we play video games. I'm like, well, nothing's changed on the console except it's more powerful. It's not like I have virtual reality, but we're always innovating. But that's when we're going to see a change in how you play, or what. Like when the Wii came out, right? It dramatically changed the way you play a video game. And so that's to me where you're going to see the biggest change for us. The biggest change for us these days is actually digital. You know, our game never ends. We're not done. We continue to make our game, and that's a big change for us, right? We are looking to make changes based on mobile. Like someday they're going to blend a little. We're going to come out with. We want people to be playing Call of Duty all the time as well, right? So I think that's where a lot of we're seeing these new platforms and saying, how do we adopt them? How do we bring them into our way of gaming and take over?
more? Is there another question down in the audience?
Yes, here.
Okay.
The topic is social responsibility. In most companies, you try to approach new employees with work-life balance benefits out of the company, social giveaways, health insurance, and likewise. And in Germany, we currently found an initiative called Gaming Aid, which is attracting within the games industry to support people in need. And do you think in the future that charity in general from within the games industry is a topic which is coming up? To give you an example, like in the music industry, Band Aid, or in the movie industry where prominent people are ambassadors for Amnesty International or likewise, that this charity issue is coming up for the games industry as we're getting bigger and bigger?
We, I don't know if you've heard about the Call of Duty endowment. We give millions away a year to put veterans to work. So it's a very big initiative. Like I said, millions a year. We actually have I think it's a 4-star general from the Marines is now running it for us. Our company, if that's what you mean by charity, that sort of thing, yeah, we do it at Sledgehammer Games. We have a new charity every week, every month, and then there's one that we do on a yearly basis. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of charity. We go out. I know we go out and we talk to schools all the time, and you know, try and help out wherever we can.
I guess the question is, how do you do sort of like a AAA version of game-related charity? I guess the way
AAA game-related charity.
Well, the way Band-Aid, I guess, was for music, right?
First-person philanthropist game.
Yeah,
You know, I think the Penny Arcade guys have done a good job supporting the Child's Play charity. I was amazed I was at their charity auction this year, and all of a sudden this huge chunk of money came in. I don't know what it was, $600,000, something like that. And it was from a group of people who played Desert Bus. Do you know this game, Desert Bus?
I drew it. I did the original.
Did you really?
Yes. It's so weird that that was a Penn and Teller game, and we finished it, and I was the art director, and I worked with Penn and Teller, and they were crazy.
So just for people who don't know, I mean, Desert Bus is it's basically the dullest game ever made.
Yeah,
the idea is that you have to drive a bus in real time across the desert, and it's kind of like Flight Simulator
for
in
8
that
hours.
sense.
You have
for
to
8
keep
hours, yeah.
Yeah.
And so these guys did this like telethon where they were just playing in shifts constantly for a week or something, and they raised a huge amount of money for charity. It was great.
Yeah, it's pretty weird because that somehow the game was stolen because it was never released, but we finished it. And Penn designed that.
I had no idea there was a Penn and Teller thing.
Oh yeah, and then there was one other level that we made. It was called the Impossible level, and he brought in Lou Reed. Remember Lou Reed? And so there's a song. You know, he walks in, and the two of you walk in, and he kills you. And we're like, that's never going to sell. And we were right.
That's Penn and Teller's sense of humor, though.
But it's made. Yeah, I can't believe that it's turned into a charity. But there are a lot of charities.
I knew we were going to get back to the subject of the future of games here, right? QUO VADIS, Desert Bus.
Desert Bus is the future.
Well, you never know.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have another question, or?
Look, the future of games is pretty darn bright, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I would like to bring in another topic that I never hear. I mean, I'm from Generation X, and we are the ones that actually grew up with video games. And we're becoming old, and we're going to get to the 60s, 70s. And I've heard so many people say, you know, when I'm 60, when I'm pensionate, we want to play. And we like a lot of the new concepts and everything, but you cannot compete against a 20-year-old. And you know, I think there's a lot of money there and a lot of future for creating actually games for the golden generation from then.
Just very briefly, one thing I can say that for many of our mobile games, the average age is above 40. It's like sometimes in the 50s. It's like average. However, these are typically not PvP games. These are maybe social experiences where you collaborate, or you like hidden object games or puzzle games or things like that. So it's typically not PvP, I think, in terms of, I don't know if we will see esports 70 plus. Will that happen?
Yeah. You never know. I mean, we have you know, easy, hard, and medium that might have senior. I don't know. I mean, look, you know, we do things right now where we do it for color blindness, you know, and we'll have a mode in there for that. So,
well, and this isn't quite what you're saying there, but I worked with a neuroscientist called Dr. Adam Ghazali, who's gotten a lot of press for some of the work he's done. One of the great things he discovered is that using a specific video game called NeuroRacer, he was able to take 60 and 70-year-olds who were really bad at driving and multitasking by looking at signs that are going by compared to, turns out I think 23 was the peak that was the best year for people who can actually control the car and also pay attention to what's going by. And using this game, he was able to get these 60s and 70-year-olds up almost to the same level of performance as the 20-somethings, which is great, but the amazing thing came that then they went 6 months without them playing any refreshers or playing other video games, tested them again, and they actually kept the lion's share of that improvement. So it may well be that the doctors will start prescribing some of those video games to people as they get older, just to kind of keep our skills sharp. And you know, I would think particularly in a country like Germany, where the driving laws and the demands of driving at some of the high speeds on the Autobahn are even stronger here.
And another question from the audience.
I'll tell you, I can't wait till we get a generation that's in the 60s and 70s that understands video games, because then that means our judges and our lawyers and our politicians and that, you know, they'll understand us better, right? And I think that's fairly important right now.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very good point. I mean, there was this German Games Award yesterday with kind of all of the high-level politicians from the mayor of Berlin to kind of people from the federal government, and it was really interesting to see. I've seen the same award like 5 years ago, where kind of it was a little bit like, okay, I do the opening speech here now, but games are not my thing, and it's something that kind of maybe my kids play, and it's changing. You have these politicians on stage who say that they play themselves, and so I think this generational change is slowly happening, and that's a really great thing.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So why don't we close with this question then about, you know, it's a global gaming business. So for you and your company, what does that mean? And does it sort of, now the fact that gaming is global, that it's pretty pervasive, how does that change what you do or run your company or participate in the industry?
Well, for us, you know, I think this is going to sound weird. There's, you know, I don't know if you go, I go around the world and I see McDonald's, and I see how McDonald's is, you know, adopted to the different countries. And they bring their food into McDonald's. And I know for us, we're doing that. We're going, you know, we want to be in China, right? And we want to be in different countries, but we have to look at the market. It's completely different. They play different. So for us, it's just learning, and you know. But you know, we'd love to be around the world.
Well, Google certainly is very worldwide, and on the games level, you know, I've learned through travel and working with people myself that you know, we're just trying a lot of different strategies. You know, one of the things though is a combination of helping people in one country sell into other countries, but also helping emerging markets sell within their own countries, you know, and create robust games industries, you know, where it may be culturally easier for somebody in one given country to make games that their compatriots will enjoy playing. It is an interesting thing to me. I mean, when I worked on the old LucasArts stuff years ago, those games did incredibly well in Germany, and we were never quite sure why. I mean, proportionally out of the whole world, this was the country where they sold best per capita, despite having a lot of in-jokes and puns and things that we didn't think would translate very well. So lots of times you just can't tell when something from one country will work well in another, and it's wonderful that we have this open, you know, digital distribution marketplace so that we can get stuff out there and people all around the world can play them.
Yeah, I played all of the LucasArts games. In the 80s, when I couldn't afford them, we just pirated them. But then I bought them actually. I think speaking of international in mobile, which is the world I live in, is obviously the market is now global. But I think one second aspect that is also very interesting is that kind of employees working in games, at least for us, that's a very, very international thing now. So we are based here in Berlin. We have all of our over 250 employees here in Berlin in one office. But even though we're based here in Berlin, Germany, less than half of the employees are German. It's over 40 nations. Yeah. It's extremely international. Many of them don't speak any word in German, and that's fine. You get along, and that's really, really great, because if you, like us, create games for the whole world that should work almost everywhere, you have to have a very, very international crowd together to create something that also works internationally. I think if we were a group of Germans creating games, that wouldn't work worldwide. And therefore, that inspires me a lot, seeing our employees from all over the world coming here, working together. That's really great.
It's absolutely right.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You want to?
Oh, just an interjection. When I was consulting in Germany, I found that there's a whole class of games of sort of micromanagement economic games, and there's a long German word for it that only work in German-speaking countries that haven't ever sold well outside of them. So it's great having stuff that works in your home backyard.
Yeah, that's true. There's these kind of games by Germans for Germans in Germany. But I think it's changing.
That's actually kind of the point I wanted to make. I mean, I'm old enough, I remember getting lectured on why games will never be big in China. And I was told that, Chinese young men and women have to study really hard for school to get into, which is true. And so their parents would never let them be distracted with games and blah, 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 blah. And of course, now it's in fact, we just saw those numbers. Tencent is the biggest gaming company, arguably, in the world right now. And I think the other interesting thing to take is that China didn't just become a consumer. I mean, I think we have this predisposition that when we conquer more of the world in a way, that they're going to just become consumers of our products. And in fact, that isn't at all what happened. Is that they, in a sense, conquer the game business, And so we've seen that with China, where Chinese taste and Chinese influence, and Chinese game design has affected the rest of the world. And likewise, I think Germany has had that effect with, through board games. And likely, these other kinds of games that you're talking about could spread to the rest of the world. So it's not so much that we open these new markets up and we can sell into them. It's more that they change the game business.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, everybody. That's a great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.